All right, today we want to do three things. First, because I kind of skirted through it quickly yesterday, we're going to go over section 5 of this MySQL by examples for beginners. All right, but yesterday I kind of went over part 6 quickly, and I want to make sure you understand the different types of joins. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. Then when we get done, I'm going to show you PHP MyAdmin, and the handout that I gave you, we're going to create a very simple table, and I'm going to give you some time to work on that today. All right. Then tomorrow when you come in, we're going to see if we can take that same table and create it that fast. I'm going to give you a spreadsheet. We're going to see if we can import everything in without having to type in a line of anything. All right. All right. So that's, like I said, that's the plan. So first, let's start going through part 5 here. And I'm not going to go and key in every single one of these queries. Feel free to. I've tried them. I haven't found one yet that doesn't work. All right. So the first thing that's discussed here in part 5, and I'm not sure exactly what page that is. It must be around page 30, somewhere around there. Page 28, it looks like, on the handout. It's called More SQL. That's what the section is called. And the first thing that they talk about is a subquery. Now, I'm going to just mention this to you. You may or may not have heard this before. This has absolutely nothing to do with this program, but I just want you to hear it. And that is, if you've ever worked with Unix, Linux, Starnix, or whatever, you probably have heard of the concept of something that's a pipe. And what a pipe typically is you run a command, whatever the command is. The output of that command becomes the input into the next command. Does that make sense? In much the same way, if you look at this query that you see right here up on the screen, the way that this happens is you run that query first, and you get some output based on that query right there. That output becomes the input to this query. And that's what I want you to understand. The reason that you typically use subqueries is they will execute much faster than typing in 2 regular queries. All right? Almost always, when you create a subquery, you can do the same thing without a subquery. You can use a join or something else. And it's funny, when I've worked with people who've gone on and have gotten into SQL and they're SQL programmers or whatever, typically they either love subqueries and hate joins, or they love joins and hate subqueries. Most of them hate subqueries. Okay, just so you know. But if you look at this, so and I'm in here also, but I was playing with PHP MyAdmin, so let me MySQL -u root, and let me use Southwind. All right. But if I grab this first subquery here, and again, I don't want to grab and put in all of these. It'll just take too much time today. But if I grab this, select distinct supplier, by now, you should all understand what this query right here does. It says, just show me the unique suppliers from the product suppliers list. All right. Now, if I remove the word distinct from there, you can see the difference. When you have distinct, it says don't show any repeats. When you don't have distinct, it shows repeats. So what I'm telling you is this command, select distinct supplier ID, is going to give you 501, 502, and 503. All right? So what that is saying is select the supplier name from suppliers where the ID is not 501, 502, or 503. Well, guess what? It's going to return the empty set because everyone in there is in supplier 501, 502, and 503. Bless you. So if we run this query, it comes back with the empty set. It doesn't mean that was wrong. It just means there was nothing that met that criteria. All right? So this was that product suppliers. So let's select star from products suppliers. All right, so you can see what's all in there. But if I insert into products, suppliers, values, and I'm just going to put, this is bogus, but I'm just going to put this in there, 3333, and we'll put in there supplier 510. Cannot update. Oh. All right, it's not letting us because it says, hey, in products, we don't have anything that's in there that's got that product ID. So I can't do it that way. So let me try it with a valid product ID. 1001. And it says, now it's failing. All right, so let's see. Because now it says we don't have a supplier that is 510. See what I'm saying? So right now I can't put it, the only way I can put in a legal record in here, illegal so to speak, is to add a new supplier ID, all right, and then put that in. That's just a waste of time. All I'm trying to tell you is when you work with this and you work with a subquery, it's a query within a query. You do the inner query first. The output from the inner query becomes the input for the outer query. Okay? All right. Again, it says, can you do this without a subquery? Yes, you can. You'd have to use a fairly sophisticated join operation, but you could. All right. You can also do inserts, updates, and deletes. All right. You can do inserts, updates, and deletes with subqueries. So this is the subquery. So I've already put it in. That's why I'm not going to do it, because it'll basically it won't be allowed because they're duplicate records. But this says select the product ID. So let's assume for a second when we run this query, let's just pretend that the product ID from that is 1001, okay, as an example. And let's assume that the supplier ID from this is 503. Then what it's saying is insert into supplier's values 1001, 503. But it's getting the values from queries as opposed to us hard coding the values in there. That's the key thing. And this, I didn't do this one because I wanted to leave QQ Corp in there. But what this does is it says, find me every supplier that might be, every supplier ID that's Q Corp, and then delete it. So that would get rid of something. So you can do these. All right? Okay. Next is date and time. And again, I've done all these already. I actually created a new table in here. But am I right in assuming, please look on the screen here what's in blue, that what's in blue there, that makes sense to everybody. We haven't dealt with dates yet, but a date is just year, dash, month, dash, day. That's it. And again, as I mentioned the other day, I believe it's still that MySQL still supports putting in for the month a 3-letter code. JAN for Jan, DEC for December, etc. All right. So this would create a brand new table called patients with a patient ID, a name, a date of birth, a last visit date, and a next visit date. Notice your next visit date, that one does allow nulls. All right. It's interesting. My wife, after us living here for 20 years, she had a doctor a couple years ago that she really liked. And then I changed insurance plans, and that doctor wasn't covered under that insurance plan. The funny thing is, now that I'm here, the doctor she used to have in Rockton is covered under my insurance plan here. So she's real happy. All right. The good news is, she told me yesterday she's putting our house on the market on May 1st, and she hopes to be here by the end of June. I will be a happier person then. All right. But the point is, she had a doctor's visit about 2 weeks ago. She's already scheduled one for a year from now. Because she knows now she'll have to, because she really likes that lady. All right? And they get along really well. But the point is, quite often, when you go to a doctor, they might say, do you want to schedule your next appointment? I usually get an annual physical. Sometimes if I have a physical, let's say on October 1st, I might literally set up a physical for the next year on October 1st or October 2nd or whatever. All right? But many times people don't do that. That's why we're allowing nulls in here. All right? So we insert into this patient's table. There is the ID. There is the patient's name. I don't know what OTTEC is supposed to be. That's when they were born. That's their last visit. And notice all of these are null. So again, this is what you get then for the data. I played around with this yesterday, and just so you know, okay, you may or may not be aware of this. I may have said it before, I may not have. But I can do this. Select, now, and it gives you that. I think we looked at this the other day, correct? Where you get both the date and the time. But if you only want the date, you can put in cur date. If you only want the time, I believe it's cur time. All right? The reason I'm telling you that is if I want to program today's date into the system, I can use either 2017-04-04 or I can put in cur date. Does that make sense? I think you can do it without the zeros too if they have leading zeros, but I don't remember. Just try it. That's the easiest way to find out. Yes?
Is there any way to change the format of that? So
Yes.
like
No. Yes and no. Yes, you can change the current format when you output it. Okay? Yes, you can do that. But as far as inputting, it expects it in that way.
Okay.
And you're going to see it, in fact, in just a second. Because that is ugly. All right, so you'll see some examples. But what I'm concerned with is, do you understand what's going on here? Select star from patients where year of the date of birth is 2011. So you can grab just the year portion. If I wanted all people, all right. Now, I wouldn't use this, but what I could do is maybe I want to find out all of my patients, if I'm a doctor, who are not, who are minors. So I could go and I could check for the year of birth, and I could say if it's less than or equal to, the current year minus whatever. You see what I'm saying? So you can write all sorts of different queries in here. Here, notice what they're doing. They're selecting the month from the current date and the day from the current date. So this is going to give you back 04, and so is this, because it's the 4th of April. In fact, if you look on here, there's going to be one that's going to be in here that's going to show you a whole bunch of stuff. Now, you may or may not have heard of this. When you set up dates, you can set up dates being timestamp. All right? What a timestamp actually is in essence, it's how many milliseconds, which remember is a thousandth of a second, how many milliseconds have passed since January 1st, 1970. And you might say, what the heck is January 1st, 1970? It's a special Unix date. It's called the Unix epoch date. So sometimes when people create things, they just put a timestamp in. Then they don't have to worry about setting dates, setting times. It'll set everything for you. And you can base stuff off of a timestamp. All right. There's really not a lot of different things that you can do with dates, just so you know. You can add values to dates. You can compare the values from dates. You can subtract one date from another date. So for instance, if you subtracted the current date minus the date you were born, all right? So for instance, if I did this, select date diff, I think I'm putting it in here right, but we'll find out. The current date, and let's say that somebody was born, I don't know, 2000, and they were born on January 1st. Knowing the luck I've been having today, this will be the wrong syntax. Date diff does not exist. Yeah, it does. So I'm putting it in wrong. Oh, there's no underscore. Okay. All right. Something in there is wrong, but it's giving me a warning, so let's show the warnings. You're going to see this later on in here anyway. Incorrect date time value, 1998. Oh, I don't even know where I got that from. Let's just go on, and we'll let the system show it to us instead of me trying to flounder my way through here. All right, so you can add values to dates. You can subtract values from dates. Why would you want to add values to dates? Well, a lot of places that as soon as you ship out a product, the payment is due. You ever hear net 60? So the payment is due within 60 days from the time it's shipped. So you could set that up in your database that the payment date would be basically 60 days after the ship date. So you could do a date add, for example. All right. I already mentioned the cur date and the cur time, and I've shown you the now already. Here are the date time types. Okay, so different things that you can use with them. Some date time functions. Again, this is a key one right here. Notice that? Notice what this gives you. In fact, let's grab this for today. I can grab the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, the second, etc. So you can manipulate any part of a date and or any part of a time. Okay? Does this make sense to you? It is grabbing the date and the time based off of my machine because we're using XAMPP or XAMPP. So if you were hooked up and you were running off, let's say, a different machine, that you were running off of a server, and that server was in a different country, which is possible, the time could be different on it than the time on your local machine. The date should be the same, but the time easily could be different. All right. Maybe that's the one I wanted. That worked. So, for instance, my daughter was born in 1990, and she was born on July 31st. She really and truly was. All right? And I believe that's, I don't know what the 7/7/27/044, if that's the number of hours she's been on live or whatever. But you can do all sorts of goofy stuff with this. All right. Now, Brady, for what you asked, if you take a look here for formatting. All right. Notice W, the day of the week, big D, the date with a suffix, big M. Most of these also, and you can go out to the reference manual and find out. But most of these that have like a capital D, a capital M, also have a lowercase d and a lowercase m, which does it differently. So you can format this any way you want. So if I wanted today's date to be April, April, space 3 or 4, comma, space 2017, I can do it by using these types of characters. All right. And the example that they give you in here, yeah, they work a little bit with dates and times, but then they have you come in and start monkeying with the stuff and prettying it up. All right? Yeah.
So is there a way to add punctuation essentially, like when you're trying to do that? So like, you have like the percent sign D or whatever it is for the day, and bring the commas in there?
Yes.
While you're doing that?
You can either manually do it, depending on the format you use, or some of the formats will put commas in there for you. So again, what I'm telling you is if I say MySQL date formats, all right, this is going to push me sooner or later to the reference manual. And in there, it's going to show you somewhere in here, I'm not sure where, but somewhere in there it's going to show you all the different ways that you can do dates and times. All right? And here's the functions. So it's not that there are just a couple of them. All right, there probably are about 30 or 40 of them. But as far as what you're able, some stuff with dates, it doesn't make sense. Wouldn't make sense to have the square root of a date. It wouldn't make sense to multiply or divide dates. That kind of stuff doesn't make sense. So really the only thing you can do arithmetically with dates is to add a number to a date, subtract a number from a date, or compare dates. Other than that, there's not a whole lot that you can do. All right, we talked a little bit about views earlier. So if you look at this, I think there was an error in this query, but I'm not sure. We'll find out right now. Yeah, it didn't like something from it. But let's suppose, if I go back and I write a query like we did yesterday, where I say select star from employees. All right, that's because we don't have employees. If I say select star from products, okay, now that isn't much to type. But if for some reason I was writing a query where, let's say I was saying select star from products where product ID in 2002, 2003, 2004, or price is greater than $1. I mean, it's kind of a stupid query, but you get the idea. So if I was going to be writing this query, select star from products where product ID in this or price greater than 1, if you look up on the screen here, I can say, instead of this, I can say create view, and I'll just call it P. P doesn't mean anything. As select star where and this. All right. Notice I don't get any output because it put the output in the view. Now you saw the output when I ran the query. Now all I have to do, since I have a view named P, is to say select P, select star from P, and I get it. So typically, if you write a very long-winded query that you're going to use often, you put create view, you give it a name as, and then you put the query in there. All right? And then rather than having to type all that out every time, you just say select star from the query name. So all a query is, all a view is a saved query. That's it. All right? If you do get rid of your table, so if I were to drop the products table right now, the view automatically gets dropped, just so you know. You can't have a view without underlying tables. And if you look now, if I say show tables, you'll notice that one of the things that it shows here is P. So when you do show tables, not only does it show you tables, but it shows you the views. All right? All right. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. We're almost through with this section. But first they talk here about transactions. And it says an atomic transaction is a set of SQL statements. And it's a set that's looked at as a single unit. With this set, either everything succeeds or it all fails. That's the most important part of that section, if you heard what I said. All right? And I gave you the example, it's like if you go to the bank, and let's say that you go to the bank and you put in some money. I don't know if you've ever done that before. I know my kids have. It bugs the heck out of I never get this. None of my kids want to have checking accounts. They just want debit accounts. Okay? And what they're told, too, with their debit accounts is typically if they put money in and they don't put it in directly, they don't walk up to the bank and put it in there, but if they put it into an ATM or whatever, it's usually not available till the next day. All right, the next business day. So my daughter has done this where she has put her check in, all right, because they don't have auto pay or electronic pay. So she's put her check in, she's gone out and she's bought a bunch of stuff and she's used her debit card and she's overdrawn it. All right? But when you work with a transaction, look at it this way. Let's assume I work for an insurance company. Every day I've got people, I add customers. Customers get removed because, for whatever reason, they go to another company or whatever. They get married and change names or get divorced and change names. So I've got a whole boatload of inserts and a whole boatload of updates and a whole boatload of deletes. All right? But if I set it up as a transaction, either every one of those inserts, every one of those updates, and every one of those deletes succeeds, or the whole thing fails. Even if I've got 100 of them and the first 99 succeed, but the last one fails, then they all fail. All right? The other thing that's key up on this, just so you hear this, is when you work with this stuff, is the word commit. All right? When you work with MySQL, what's called your auto commit is on. What that means is, as soon as you do something to a database, it's automatically written to it. Auto commit is set to 1, which means it's on. If you go in and you set your auto commit to 0, so if you do that, if you go in and you set auto commit to 0, I don't know if it's commit or auto commit, but it doesn't matter, you can try it. Then nothing gets written to the database until from your command line you type in commit semicolon. So what's kind of nice about that, and what some people do, is they turn off commit. And then they do whatever they want to do to their database because they know it's not being written to it. All right? And then when they're done and they're ready to actually go in, they might get out of the system, then get back in, then turn commit back on. The other thing you can do with this is something that's called rollback. And with rollback, you can set what are called checkpoints. So in other words, if I know I'm going to be making a ton of changes in a day, let's say I make 500 changes. So I make 200 of them, and I set myself up a checkpoint. Then I make 200 more, and I set myself up a checkpoint. Then I make my last 100, and I realize my last 300 were screwed up. I can do a rollback to that first checkpoint, and it'll undo the last 300 that I've done. All right? And if you say, well, that's kind of confusing, we're not going to deal with them anyway. But I just wanted you to hear what they were. And the last thing they talk about in here, again, unless you're going to program, you're probably not going to use user variables. So I'm just going to hold off on those. All right. Now, I went back last night and I reread this thing on more on join because I went through this yesterday, but I went through it very quickly. All right. And I actually went in and put in their tables that they have right here. So they put in 2 tables that look like this when you get done. You don't have to do this. But if you do, and you do a select star from each one, you can see what they have. I think you'd all agree, looking at this, that when you look at the IDs between the 2 tables, they're 2 different tables. But each table has an ID of 2. Each table has an ID of 3. Okay? Only the first table has an ID of 1. Only the second table has an ID of 4. So if I was in here and I asked for an ID of 4, there wouldn't be anything. If I was in here and I asked for an ID of 1, there wouldn't be anything. All right? And that's what the author is trying to show you here. So what the author says, that's that Cartesian product join. Remember, 3 in one, 3 in the other, 3 times 3 is 9. So you've already seen that. But then the author says, well, what if we start putting some constraints on here? There they do a join, and it looks funky, but what they're showing you is in both cases, those are the only IDs that appear in both tables. And those are ID 2 and ID 3. So they show everything. That's the select star. That's why you get those descriptions. All right? And I didn't even tell you this, but I want to mention it. I don't like the way the author did this. See this word right here? True or false? We've used that word in commands before. True. 2 different ways. DESC followed by a table name to describe the table. DESC in an order by for descending order. All right? What they're saying is if you want to use DESC as the name of a field, you must put it in grave accents. That's one place you have to do that. And I'm like, there's got to be a better name you can use. I think it's very confusing to have DESC in a query as a field name where you might have DESC in there after an order by. Now, if you don't agree, you can use it. You can have a field name named int or varchar or char. But if you do that, you must put them in that grave accents or backticks. You just have to. That's a rule. All right. So the author talks about outer joins, left joins, and right joins. And the bottom line is this. It's if I do a left join, so let's assume that in table 1, this is exactly what they have. I've got 1, 2, 3. And in table 2, I've got 2, 3, and 4. That's exactly what we have. All right? If I say do a left join, and I have that table first, it's going to show me 1, 2, 3, and it's going to actually, it says show me everything in this table, all right, even if there are no matches in this table. So that's what it's going to show me, all right. But if I put table 2 first, it says show me everything that's in this table, whether or not it's in that table. So it'll show me null because there is no number 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one will actually show me 1, 2, 3, null, depending on how I write the query. And that's what this whole section does, is they show you. The only difference between a left join and a right join is with a left join, the major table is first. With a right join, the major table is second. Any table that you create as a left join, you can create as a right join, just by flipping the order of the tables. All right? So they talk about that, and they show boatloads of examples. And that's it. Again, if you are struggling with this stuff, you might want to go at the end of the chapter here. You might want to go here and look at the exercises on part 7. They ask you to do things, and I believe in here they also give you the answers right away. It'd probably be in your best interest to try to create them first without having the answers. All right, to see if you can do them on your own. So I'm going to stop taping this, and then I'm going to start up again. But what I'd like you to do is, if you are in MySQL in the console window, type exit in twice to get yourself out, please.